Well, good evening, everyone, and may I add my own welcome to that of Luke and say it's wonderful to have so many with us this evening. So, are you ready for Christmas? In particular, is your tree up yet? I discovered today it's expected 8 million trees will be sold in this country this Christmas. You'll see we've got a few of those here at St. Helens, which are looking pretty good. I wonder, have you seen the big tree up in Trafalgar Square, the one that Norway gives as a gift to the nation each December? If you have, you may agree with a number who think this year it is somewhat underwhelming. But there is an explanation for it. The tree itself will tell you on its Twitter account. Did you know that the Trafalgar Square Christmas tree has a Twitter account? It says this: I would like everyone to know that half my branches are not missing, they are social distancing. Well, there's a phrase, isn't it, we don't really want to hear at the moment, social distancing. We fear that restrictions like that are going to come in and spoil Christmas. Although maybe we realize that all too often, restrictions or not, Christmas is sometimes a little underwhelming, a bit like that tree in Trafalgar Square. So the question is, what should we do? Should we just lower our expectations a little bit? Downplay Christmas? Well, quite the opposite. There is so much more to Christmas. And to see this, we're going to look together for a few minutes at one sentence from the New Testament that summarizes the significance of Jesus' coming. It's taken from a book in the New Testament called Hebrews. It's printed for us on our service sheets. I'll read it. Since, therefore, the children share in flesh and blood, he himself, that is Jesus, likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Now, I'm guessing that may not have been what you were expecting. That doesn't really sound very Christmassy. But again, there may be more to Christmas than we realized. So let's take a look. The sentence, I think, starts maybe where we would expect it to do that. He himself, that is Jesus, partook of flesh and blood like the rest of us, saying God himself in human form stepped into our world. And I guess we're not surprised to hear that. We've heard that story, the Christmas story. But of course, that's not to say that we actually believe it, even if we are here this evening. Because I guess despite hearing that claim, maybe since we were very small, well, we've never really seen fit to take it seriously. In fact, you might challenge me and say, but how can we take it seriously? We need evidence to substantiate a claim like that. And of course, the evidence, we would say, is maybe right where you are sitting, in that copy that Luke spoke of the Gospel of Matthew. That is one of Jesus' disciples, that is an associate, one of Jesus' friends. Can you imagine? Matthew lived with Jesus for years. He knew what Jesus was like, inside out. And yet Matthew came to this stunning conclusion we heard earlier: God with us. Of course, that's a shocking assertion, which is why he wrote down his gospel for us to read. Now, maybe we haven't read a gospel for a while, maybe never. Well, one of my sons can't wait till the Christmas holidays. He has already bought his ticket to see Spider-Man, No Way Home, the new film. And maybe you put the Gospel of Matthew in the same sort of category. Yes, a bit of fun. Yes, interesting, but fiction. And yes, there are remarkable things in the Gospel of Matthew, amazing miracles, teaching like you've never heard before. But Matthew wrote that down because he was there and he really wants us to read it. So why not this Christmas, if not for a while or never? Pick it up, take this with you, have a read. Ask yourself, does this read like history? Is this believable? And if so, then who is this Jesus? But as you hear me say that, you might be thinking, oh, whatever. I don't actually care who Jesus is. It doesn't matter. He's just not for me. Well, just look again at our sentence. It might challenge that presupposition. Verse 15, little 15, and then it tells us that Christmas is for those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. Now, these past couple of years, our society has been marked, hasn't it, by fear. We've been asking ourselves, how are we now to live in this situation we find ourselves in? Well, one writer answers that question like this: how are we to live? Well, quote, "Why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year. Or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night. Or indeed, as you're already living in an age of cancer, an age of motor accidents." The writer goes on, "It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty." Now, those are very blunt words. In fact, they were written by C.S. Lewis over 70 years ago, and he wrote them in response to the threat of the atomic bomb. But don't they just apply so much today, which just goes to show, so yes, the current threat has changed, now it's the coronavirus, but the underlying fear hasn't, because the certainty is still there. And don't we know it? The American atheistic author, novelist Philip Roth once said this: "In every calm and reasonable person, there is a hidden second person scared witless about death." Or this side of the pond, take Jeremy Clarkson, the petrolhead turned wannabe farmer. He is a wealthy man, successful, beautiful girl. He's popular. Some find him funny. Well, Clarkson, doesn't he? He seems to have it all. But this is just what he said recently. He said, "I think about dying every day." He then went on to say, "In 40 years I shall be dead and nobody shall remember me." So death is on his mind, and it may well be on ours. What do we fear? Well, of course, the process of dying might be painful and unpleasant. Death may seem to utter, well, everything in life meaningless. But even more than that, there is also the issue of, well, what comes next? After we die, what will then happen? Well, the comedian Ricky Gervais tweeted this: "Just remembered that my life is an insignificant blip in the eternal void of nothingness." Does he believe that? I don't really know. Do we? Really? Whatever our declared worldview might be, whether atheistic, evolutionary, whatever it is, do we really think my life is an insignificant blip in the eternal void of nothingness? I don't think I know anybody who actually lives like that. Because we do suspect, we hope that there is more. We think there really must be more. And so we think, well, beyond death, what lies there? Now, I have here, it's quite an old book. It is the Rules for the Conduct of Life. It was printed, well, the original, in the early 20th century, so just over 100 years ago. And it is for the gentlemen of the City of London. Let's extend it to the ladies. So all of us in the square mile, this is what you'd have read just over 100 years ago: Rules for the Conduct of Life. Let me read for you number 5, rule number 5 of the conduct of life. "Since death is the only unavoidable passage into eternity, a wise man will make it the constant business of his life that he may die well, and that death may prove to him a passage not into eternal misery, but into eternal happiness." Well, haven't times changed? The secularist, maybe you, scoff at hearing those words. But I think many, without of course letting it on, those are the questions that nag away. What if there is a God to whom one day I will give account? Yes, we don't talk about it, but it's not to say that death and what lies beyond doesn't regularly, even menacingly, force its way into the minds of Londoners like us. We do fear death, this lifelong slavery. And that is what Christmas is all about. According to this sentence, it is for those who fear death. How could that be? What could Jesus coming all those centuries ago have to do with this certainty that you and I face today? Well, for a start, there's a very striking phrase in the middle of verse 14, "that through death." Isn't that a striking thing for a writer to highlight? The writer tells us Jesus was born, Christmas, took on flesh and blood, We know that during Jesus' life, he did so many amazing things, so many good things, spoke such wisdom. But our writer says nothing of that, any of Jesus' qualities. The only thing he says is that he was born, he took on flesh and blood in order to die. Our writer says that's the reason God became a man. But why do that? Well, read on verse 14. That through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death. That is the devil. The devil. Well, if you weren't incredulous already, you're all looking very polite, but I wonder what is really going on. Really, the devil. On my way here on the 388 bus this evening, I passed through Bethnal Green, where you might have seen Satan's Whiskers cocktail bar. Inside, there are little devils cut into the bar tops. There are devilish cocktails on offer. It's all a bit of fun. Or then Man United, the Red Devils. Have you seen Fred the Red, the friendly devil mascot bouncing up and down the touchline, entertaining the kids? All a bit of fun. It's a cartoon character, pitchfork, pointy tail, and all the rest. Who on earth takes Satan and the devil seriously? Well, Jesus did. And I say that because many claim to respect what Jesus said, his inspirational teaching. But I often wonder, do they actually listen? Because Jesus will tell us in no uncertain terms the reason he came to earth was to defeat the devil. So we think, well, what has the devil got to do with any of this anyway in 21st century London? Well, the sentence tells us the devil has the power of death. Now, what does that conjure up in your mind? The devil has the power of death. Is that saying that he could suddenly appear like in a horror film or a nightmare and bring us to a gruesome end? No, that's not what it means at all. In fact, it's more serious than that. The devil's power of death is that the devil has the power of accusation. Now, our society today is acutely aware of the power of accusation. You say the wrong thing in the office, in your circle of friends, wherever it is, and you could be in big trouble. We've seen it recently, haven't we? Maybe the words or the social media posts of a celebrity or a sports star. Something they said years ago has been dug up, resurfaced. Someone's put a spin on it, and that individual's career and reputation is ruined. Forgiveness in very short supply. And it turns out the devil's accusation is all the more powerful. Because Jesus' coming shows us, without any doubt, there is a God who made each of us, who gave us so much. But this is the God that we have chosen to reject, to throw it all back in his face. I'll live as I please, thanks very much. And the state of our world shows what happens when humanity does that. Although God said from the beginning that if we did that, if we turned against him, we would die. Not just a physical death, but to be separated from God, from all that is good forever. And the devil's accusation is, you deserve that death. And what's alarming is that he's right. But Christmas. Jesus came to destroy the one who had the power of death. And in this sentence, we're told Jesus did that through his death. The point is, Jesus, the only person who's ever lived who did not deserve to die, he lived the perfect life. But he came to die the death that others deserve so that they wouldn't have to face that death. Just last Tuesday in Oxford High School in Michigan, 4 students were shot dead. But it could have been many more. The news has slowly come down that one of those who died was a 16-year-old named Tata Meyer. And it turns out when he realized what was happening in his high school, rather than run, he rushed the shooter in an attempt to disarm him. There was an ensuing struggle, during which Tata was shot numerous times. But that gave time for others to flee to safety. So Tata did die. Many others were saved. And so it is that Jesus came to die the death that we deserve, taking our place. And now that that death has been died, so to speak, the devil has no accusation to hold against us. The devil has lost the power of death. Now, if all this sounds quite speculative, quite theoretical, you might ask, well, how can I have any sense that this death was effective like that? To which there is one word answer, namely resurrection. And again, the evidence is written by eyewitnesses, by many who saw that Jesus physically rose again from the dead. He conclusively demonstrated his victory over death. And so this forgiveness really is on offer to any who will come to him for it. As you go past Satan's Whiskers cocktail bar in Bethnal Green, you might see the sign that says, "Sinners welcome." It's a bit of light-hearted banter. But that is also really the message of Christmas. Sinners welcome. Because the point is not at all about what we have to do for God, as if we have to get again to his good books. It's far too late for that. We've turned away from God, which is why we fear death. No, the point of Christmas is what Jesus has come to do for us. And I'll close again with this sentence which tells us why Christmas. Since, therefore, the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery.